hard to imagine what it would have been like for Mary to hold that head after Jesus was taken off the cross and see that gory head, so wounded, so marred. And remember just 33 years earlier, holding the head of a little baby, of her son. This Mother's Day, we're going to look at that son whom she held. We're going to look at Jesus Christ. And if you have a Bible, we're going to turn to Matthew chapter 20. Matthew chapter 20, where Jesus is actually predicting that very scene that we've just sung about, that gory scene on the cross. A fifth grade teacher was teaching her class about the properties of magnets, and the next day she gave them a quiz. And the first question on the quiz was, I start with M, I have 6 letters, I'm good at picking things up, what am I? And they were supposed to say a magnet, and most of the kids wrote a mother. They say that by the time your child turns 18, moms will have invested 18,000 hours in their life. That's per kid. They say it's equivalent to 3 extra months of leisure time per year. And so that's a significant sacrifice that mothers make for their children. It reminds me of a dad who is trying to explain to his little 4-year-old daughter the concept of marriage. And so he thought, maybe I need a visual aid. So he went and got their wedding album, and he opened it, and he was showing his 4-year-old girl these pictures of their wedding and the service and the wedding party. And eventually he said, honey, do you have any questions? And she looked up at her dad, and she pointed to the picture and said, so Daddy, what you're telling me is this is the day Mommy came to work for us? That's probably what it feels like to many of you mothers, especially to those of you who have young children and you're still in that 24/7 mode. This morning, we're going to look at the story of a mother who's unnamed in Matthew's gospel, but we know from the parallel account in Mark's gospel that her name is Salome, or Salome, not to be confused with the sandwiches my mom would put in my sack lunch when I was a kid, and also not to be confused with the daughter of Herodias, who danced for the head of John the Baptist. So that Salome was the dancing daughter. This Salome is the loving, devoted mother. Salome loved her children. She wanted what was best for her boys. Salome had married a successful small business owner who had done very well for himself. He was a rather successful fisherman. But Salome wanted more for her sons than even her husband Zebedee had. Salome had great expectations, had high aspirations for her sons. And we see in this passage that many mothers want their sons to be great. Many mothers want their sons to be treated like a king, want their children to succeed in life, to be great. And we see this beginning in verse 20. Then came to him, that is to Jesus, the mother of Zebedee's children with her sons, worshiping him. She kneels down before him to make this request, and desiring a certain thing of him. And he said unto her, what wilt thou? She saith unto him, grant that these 2, my sons, may sit the one on thy right hand and the other on thy left in thy kingdom. This mother wants her children to be great. She wants her boys to literally be treated as kings. In the ancient Near East, the one who sat on the right of the king was the second in command of all the empire, of all of the kingdom. The one who sat on the left was the third command over all of the kingdom. And so this mother, Salome, comes to Jesus and she wants the top spots in the kingdom for her sons. Apparently, James and John had told their mother about Jesus' promises. And in verse 28 of chapter 19, if you look back just a few verses at the end of chapter 19, and Jesus said unto them, verily I say unto you, that ye which have followed me in the regeneration, that is in the new world, the new kingdom that he would establish, when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory, ye also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So Salome knew Jesus had made this astounding promise that he was going to establish a new kingdom, that he was the king, and in that kingdom there would be 12 thrones, representative, significant of the 12 tribes, and that these men would sit on those 12 thrones. And so Salome, being the good mother that she is, naturally wants her sons to be on the inner thrones. Her sons to be on the greatest thrones. And this really makes sense. Because who were James and John? They weren't just part of the 12, they were part of the 3. They were part of Jesus' inner circle. And so this mom is thinking, hey, my sons comprise 2/3 of Jesus' inner circle. My son, I mean, can you imagine how proud you would be if your son, his best friend was Jesus Christ, the Son of God? Her son John was the beloved disciple, the one whom Jesus would recline at his chest. He was so close. John was always at Jesus' side. So why not in the kingdom? Why not when Jesus established his kingdom? Why wouldn't he make her 2 sons the right hand and the left hand thrones? And let's not be too quick to judge Salome. She obviously wasn't a bad mother. She was clearly a godly mother who loved Yahweh. She was a mother who had raised these 2 godly sons. I mean, to think that these men, her sons, were 2 of the closest men in the whole world to Jesus. In fact, we can see immediately some things that are good about her request. I mean, the first thing we see is that she had faith, that she believed Jesus really was the king, and she believed that though it certainly didn't look like it now, this poor carpenter with no place to lay his head, with a ragtag band of fishermen and tax collectors, despised outcasts following him, that he would establish the kingdom, but she believed. She had faith. She also apparently liked to pray. She prayed to Yahweh, and so she, believing that this is the king, this is the Messiah, she comes with her request, her petition, and she prays, she bows down, and she asks Jesus, will you allow this to happen? So there's some very good things about her request. This is why I believe Jesus doesn't rebuke her. The problem is not her faith. That is great. The problem is not her exercise of prayer. That is commendable. The problem is the content of her prayer. This mother assumes that in God's kingdom, greatness is based on status and rank, on power and authority. Salome thinks like almost every single mom thinks today. This is the way mothers think. This is what they want for their kids. The status of being on the cheerleading squad. The rank of being highest in the class. The power of being the big guy on the football field. The authority of a successful career. Most parents, most mothers want their child to be on the honor roll, to be the team captain, to be first chair in the orchestra. In fact, many parents will actually take their kids out of church every weekend to travel all over the country, not to play against other professional athletes for millions of dollars. This isn't some Eric Liddell dilemma where the fastest man of the world is deciding whether he's going to run in the Olympics on Sunday. No, they take their kids out of church to play against other kids, only a minuscule fraction of whom will ever get paid in that sport. Most of these parents will pay thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. And yet, for some reason, we think, well, there's something noble, there's something great about wanting your kids to be the best, wanting your kids to be the greatest. And it's not just a Western thing. Before you think that Americans are bad, read about Asia, read about Japan, read about the tiger moms. This desire for greatness for our children is something that comes at great cost not only to the kids, but I think especially to the moms. That there's this awful burden on mothers in 2018 that is often referred to as mom guilt. And I'm sure that moms have always compared themselves to each other. We know that girls have done this since the beginning of junior high. And Hollywood sure doesn't help. The media sure doesn't help. But what really makes it so difficult, what really ratchets up mom guilt in 2018 is social media. Because now this comparison doesn't just take place in the locker room or the hallway or the recess field. Now this comparison takes place on a worldwide stage. And it takes place not just with your friends in the PTA or the co-op, not just with other women in church, not just with other moms who are your friends in college or in high school, but it goes all the way back to junior high school. Those jealous girls in junior high school are all connected through social media and constantly comparing themselves on this worldwide stage of the internet, the World Wide Web. And it's taking place not just for a few hours at school every day, not just for a little period of time in your life, but it takes place 24/7. And it's not reality TV, it's worse than reality TV. It's this fake, created, augmented reality that mothers feel compelled to make their lives look like this reality where every single photo, every single video, every vacation report, every announcement of your kid's 14th birthday or half birthday is mediated through all these filters and lenses and touched up better than a Madison Avenue marketing firm of 20 years ago. And it's this ridiculous competition to have the greatest home, to cook the greatest meals, to go on the greatest vacations and the greatest day trips, and to have the greatest marriage, and of course, at the center ring of this circus charade, to have the greatest kids. And we wonder why so many women are depressed. So many women are sad, so many women feel worthless, so many women are on antidepressants, so many women are dying behind the photos of these Pinterest perfect meals and Insta-worthy smiles and selfies and fake Facebook posts. You're dying to be great, for your family to be great, for your lives to be great, especially for your children to be great, like Salome. But you're aiming for the wrong goal. You don't even know what you're asking for. Some of you are saying, wow, this is a pretty depressing Mother's Day sermon. This isn't just because I'm a cynical pastor. It's what Jesus says to this mom in verse 22. But Jesus answered and said, "Ye know not what ye ask. Are ye able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of, and to be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with?" Again, Jesus doesn't rebuke Salome, this mother with naturally great expectations, high aspirations for her boys. He doesn't rebuke her. He doesn't rebuke the brothers. He simply asks them this question. He says, that greatness that you want so badly will come at a cost. Do you want to follow me in my suffering? Are you able to drink of the cup that I will drink of? And they say unto him, We are able. And he saith unto them, Ye shall drink indeed of my cup, and be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with. Church history tells us Salome's son James was beheaded ISIS style with a sword. Church history tells us that, and the Bible tells us that Salome's son John died as a prisoner, as an old man, all alone, with no family, no wife, no friends, exiled for decades on the island of Patmos. This mother got what she wanted, but did she want what she got? These two sons of thunder would find out that the path to greatness in God's kingdom is not through status, it's not through rank, it's not through thrones, it's not through power. In fact, it's the very opposite. Many mothers want their sons to be treated like a king, but we see in this passage the father wants his son to be treated like a servant. Look at the end of verse 23 as Jesus continues. He says, "But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared of my Father." See, Jesus didn't come to earth for a throne. He didn't come to earth for status or power. He came to earth to do the Father's will. That was the driving force. At every decision point in Christ's life, this is what drives Jesus. 6 chapters later, in Matthew 26, Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he says, "Oh, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, but not as I will, but thou wilt." He constantly says, it's your will. He constantly obeys the Father. He constantly submits to the Father's will. Jesus wasn't following his mother's aspirations. He was following his Father's will. Remember when he was 12 and he stayed at the temple. And Mary and Joseph and the whole caravan is going back to their hometown, and they realize Jesus is missing, and they backtrack and they find him. And Mary asks the 12-year-old Jesus, "Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have sought you in great distress." And Jesus said unto them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business? Didn't you know that my driving force in life is to do my Father's will, to be about my Father's business?" We remember at the end of Matthew chapter 12 when Mary and Christ's half-brothers come and try to dissuade him from his ministry. What does Jesus say in Matthew 12 verse 50? He says, "For whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mothers." He, in a sense, disowns them and says, "I've got to stay on mission because I'm not here to fulfill my mother's aspirations again." Jesus knows that this will happen, but he follows the Father's will. You say, what was the Father's will? Philippians 2. That he would make himself of no reputation. That he would take upon him the form of a servant. That he would be made in the likeness of men. That he would humble himself. That he would become obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. The Father sent Jesus. He wanted his Son to be treated like a servant. And yet, what do we want for our kids? To be treated like kings. Look at verse 24. "And when the 10 heard it, they were moved with indignation against the two brethren." Why? Were the other 10 upset at the audacity, the presumption, the arrogance of these two brothers? No, we know from the parallel passages they were mad that James and John had beaten them to the punch. It's like when one of your kids asks for the only toy or the last piece of cake, and the other kids get mad at him, not because he was selfish, but because they're selfish, because they wish they'd thought of it first. See, the problem here isn't just this one mother. It's not just these two sons. All 12 of the disciples are clueless. That they are all in it for their glory, and Jesus has come to be a servant. They don't get it. This is the third time Jesus predicts his death. And earlier, one of the earlier predictions in Matthew chapter 16, Peter has just rightly answered his great confession, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And so Jesus says, "Yeah, and since I'm the Christ, we're going to go to Jerusalem and I'm going to be killed there." And Peter turns to him and rebukes him. "How dare you, Lord? You can't do that." Jesus has to say to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. Peter, you're so clueless. You're a pawn of the devil. You've played right into his hands. You completely misunderstand what my mission is. My mission is to go to Jerusalem. My mission is to die. I'm not here for status or rank or power or glory. I've come to die." The disciples didn't get it, and we often don't get it. We talk about servant leadership, and I'm just serving the Lord. But when it really comes down to it, so many times we're just like this mother and her sons and all 12 of the disciples. At the bottom line, we want to pursue greatness. How often do you find yourself being slow to serve but eager for honor? The next time you feel yourself being filled up with indignation, ask yourself, is this really righteous indignation for God's glory, or is this indignation because someone got ahead of me? Because someone else thought of it first? Because someone else pulled out in front of me? Because someone else is going to get the glory? We want to be treated like kings. Look at verse 25. But Jesus called them unto him. He brings his students into the classroom and said, ye know. This is common knowledge that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them, and they that are great exercise authority upon them. Jesus says, you know how the Roman Empire operates. You know how our culture operates today. And in the same way, we could say the same thing in 2018. You know how American society today is, that everyone wants to be great. Everyone wants to get ahead. Everyone wants to be the next American Idol. We idolize great athletes and beautiful actors and rich billionaires. We marginalize disabled people and less than perfect babies. In fact, if we can detect the defect early enough, we just kill them. Homeless people never write best-selling books. Nobody wants to read about them. We want to be like the rich and famous. I mean, even good isn't good enough for us. We want to go from good to great. But should it be this way for Christians? Should it be this way among you? Not according to Jesus. Look at verse 26. But it shall not be so among you. Why not? Why shouldn't you want your kids to achieve greatness in the world's eyes, moms? Why shouldn't you push your kids, dads, to have the world's greatness? Because the world's greatness isn't nearly great enough. In the words of C.S. Lewis, why would you settle to be making mud pies in an alley when you could enjoy a day at the sea? Why would you spend your life pursuing the corporate ladder of trying to script and save and scratch and claw to put down your coworkers, to climb one rung higher in the corporate ladder, to try to exercise dominion over your roommates or your neighbors? Jesus says you're too good for that. In fact, you're too great for that. You are too great for the pathetic scratching and clawing to get to the top. The top of what? Your career? Your class? Your multinational company that's going to give you stuff that will rot and decay? The moth will take care of it. Just like your body that will one day decay and go into the ground. He says you're too great to waste your life scratching and clawing for trivial pursuits. You are sons of the Almighty. You should pursue a whole new level of greatness. You shouldn't stoop to the puny efforts of the world to pursue worldly greatness when you could experience true greatness. You say, how? How can I experience true greatness? How can my kids be truly great? Back to verse 26. But whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister. That's the word diakonos, where we get our word deacon. It means servant. And whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant. The word doulos, your slave. Jesus says, and that word your is plural. He says, if you want to be truly great, then you should be the one serving these others around you. You should be their slave. You should be giving of yourself to others. And this is exactly what Jesus did. Remember the Last Supper? When these disciples were having a very similar discussion over who's going to be the greatest, what does Jesus do? He girds himself with the towel of a slave, and he bends down and he wipes the feces off their feet. And Jesus doesn't just model that kind of servant leadership in the last few hours of his life. This is something he models throughout his life. He was the suffering servant. Everything he did was to serve others. Look at verse 16. He says, so the last shall be first and the first last. Look at the end of chapter 19, verse 30. But many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Moms, don't teach your kids to be great. You don't have to live with mom guilt that your life isn't great enough, your family's not great enough, your kids aren't great enough. Just teach your kids to serve. to put on the mind of Christ, to lay down their rights for the rights of others, to lay down their privilege for those who have less than they do, to give of themselves to the least of these, to serve their enemies. And this isn't just hollow talk from Jesus. He isn't just preaching, do what I say, not as I do. Look at verse 28. Even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. There's no better model of selflessness that Jesus could point to than to himself. And he doesn't say I. He says the Son of Man. He refers to himself as the Son of Man. He says as God. Jesus had every right to be served, but instead he came to serve. He came to be the suffering servant of Isaiah 53, who would be despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised, crushed for our iniquities. The chastisement that brought us peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. Jesus doesn't just give us the perfect model of how we should live as slaves, as servants of others. Jesus gives us more than a model. He gives himself as our ransom. He dies in our place. He takes the wounds in our place. He takes the stripes in our place. He pays for our transgressions. Jesus came not to be a servant who worked for us. He came to be a servant who died for us, who paid the ransom price by dying in our place, so that if you will turn from your sin, if you will trust his work, you can be saved. A man named Solomon Rosenberg was arrested with his wife during World War II. He and his wife and their 2 sons, all Jews, were sent to a Nazi concentration camp. And this happened to be a labor camp where basically there was one simple rule: as long as you can do your work, you're permitted to live, but as soon as you become too weak to work, then you will be exterminated. And Solomon, having watched all of these people marched to their deaths, realized that in his family, the one who would be next would likely be his youngest son, David, who had always been a very frail child. He was the smallest. And so every evening when Rosenberg would come back to the barracks after hours of labor, he would search everywhere for the faces of his family. And when he found them, they would huddle together and embrace each other, and they would thank God for another day of life. One day, Rosenberg came back, and he didn't see those familiar faces. He finally discovered his oldest son, Joshua, who was in a corner, huddled and weeping and praying. And he said, "Joshua, tell me it's not true." And Joshua turned and said, "It is true, Papa. Today, David wasn't strong enough to do his work, and so they came for him." Mr. Rosenberg said, "But where is your mother?" And Joshua said, "Oh, Papa, when they came for David, he was too afraid, and he cried." And Mama said, "There's nothing to be afraid of, David." And she took his hand and went with him. Many of you mothers know exactly what it's like to give of your life for someone else. Many of you put on the mind of Christ every single day, laying down your life for your children. And I would say to you, don't do that so that your kids can be great. Do that so that your kids can do what you're doing. Do that so that your kids can see what you are modeling. Teach them not to be great, not to aspire for rank or status or thrones or position. Teach them to do that instead, to serve like you serve, to serve like Christ serves, to put on the mind of Christ. Don't spend these years laboring under this horrible burden of mom guilt that I'm just not going to be great enough, my kids aren't going to be great enough. Don't waste your life on social media trying to look great to others. Don't waste these precious moments with your kids trying to push them to be great in the world's eyes, a greatness that is fleeting, that is a vapor that appears for a millisecond and vanishes away. But spend your days teaching your kids to be servants of others, to be slaves of Jesus Christ. How are you serving the King who became a slave for you? 1 Corinthians 6 says, "You are not your own, but you are bought with a price. He gave his life as the suffering servant for your ransom." Many mothers want their sons to be treated like kings, but the Father wants his Son to be treated like a servant. Let's stand this morning with our heads bowed and our hearts open to the work of the Spirit. This isn't an easy sermon to preach on Mother's Day because it hits so close to home for all of us. In our heart of hearts have this desire, and we often wrap it as if it's a noble desire for our kids to be the best, for our grandkids to be the greatest, for our next generation to be on top. When Jesus Christ says to this mother, that's not what life is about. That's not what my kingdom is about. Instead, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Instead, the path to glory is through suffering. The path to the crown is through the cross. This morning, if you are a believer, maybe you would say, I want the Holy Spirit to work this message into my heart. I want to live the kind of life that Jesus lived. And I want my children not to pursue the world's greatness, but instead to pursue being servants. Instead to pursue being slaves of Christ. Maybe this morning you don't know Jesus Christ as your Savior. You've never experienced the joy of having the burden of your sin lifted, cut from off your back like Pilgrim at the cross through the blood ransom of Jesus Christ. Maybe this morning you need to come and talk to a pastor or a counselor who'd love to show you how you can have Christ's righteousness given to your account, imputed to you, and your sin exchanged for the ransom that he will pay the price as a substitute in your place. As the musicians play in just a couple moments, if you would like to just come to the front and spend some time in prayer, kneeling down front, if you would like to spend time there at your seat as we take some time for reflection and prayer, if you'd like to talk to a counselor, we have pastors standing on the main floor and the balcony. I'll be at the fountain, and they'll be at the doors afterwards. We'd love to show you this morning, this Mother's Day Sunday, how you can know the one who paid his life as your ransom. Father, this morning we thank you for our mothers. We thank you for the way so many of them, as loving mothers, even godly mothers, poured their lives into us. Father, I pray that you would help us not to adopt the mindset and the values of the world. Pray that you would help moms not to put undue burdens of guilt on themselves by comparing themselves to others, by seeking a greatness that this world pursues, that they would seek it not, but instead that they would pursue serving their children in a way that models the kind of Christ-like service that we experienced in Jesus coming to earth in the form of a servant, as a human, taking on flesh and becoming our sacrifice, our ransom on the cross. I pray that as a people we would be noticeably different from the culture around us. Pray that we would train our kids for different goals, for a whole new level of greatness that comes not through status and not through rank and not through thrones, but instead that comes through the path of service and suffering as slaves of Christ. Pray that as we serve each other, as we serve our neighbors, as we serve even our enemies, that you would use the gospel and the fragrance of